Okay, I'd like to call the Committee of a Whole Workshop meeting of May 27th, 2019 to order. I'd like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given by the clerk. Would the clerk please raise your hand? Thank you. If assistance is required, please see the clerk, who just raised her hand. Once you have evacuated the building, gather in the front parking lot outside the town hall at the meeting place. Also, Town of Lincoln Committee and Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Please remember to silence all cellular devices. We'll do a roll call. On the left. Councillor Reimer is currently absent. He's running a little late. Councillor Timmers from Ward 4. Councillor Mikula, Councillor McPherson from Ward 3. The CAO, Mike Rokopoulos. On my right, we have Madam Mayor, and we have Councillor Brunet from Ward 2. And Councillor Renchema and Councillor Pachariva are also running late, so they will be here shortly. Also, there's lots of staff here in attendance, so I'd like to thank all of you and your shining faces for joining us tonight. And are there any declarations of interest? No, seeing none. Statutory public meetings, there are no statutory public meetings on the agenda. Delegations, there are none. Consent agenda, there is none. The regular agenda. We are now considering item 7.1, Council Priorities Workshop. We have in attendance Lori Simpson from Leading Minds Lab, providing a presentation regarding council priorities. I will ask our CAO to provide a brief introduction to today's workshop and explain the workshop format.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome members of council for our council priority sessions number 2. I did send council a little bit of an overview this morning in terms of what to expect today, but in terms of our viewing audience, I always think it's important that we reiterate some of that, so I will, probably for some of you that have had a chance to go through that, this will be repetition, but again, for those watching or those who may watch, I do want to provide a little bit of an overview. So. Thanks to members of council for their participation over the last number of days. We were before you last week with our first session looking at trends, and then over the last number of days we did complete some surveys, which will be part of the work that we do today. In terms of what we're looking to do today for you, over the next 3 hours, we will be going a little bit deeper into those trends and then the priorities for Lincoln, which are going to be coming out of those. The objective really is to explore some of the responses to the key trends that were identified in the Wiki survey and to examine their long-term consequences using a higher order type of thinking. One of the comments I made in introducing this last time was that it is somewhat unconventional in terms of the approach we are taking, and it does, I think, demand a different type of thinking and trust in a different process and a different style and approach to this, but one that at the end of the day, I trust will lead us in the right direction. So we will be reviewing some of the strategic objectives. Again, we'll have a presentation on the survey results. We will go into an introduction around the futures tool and some of the mindset principles, and then we will be debriefing. And then following that, we anticipate, as I think I said in that email to members of council, that we will be scheduling a follow-up session where we will talk about areas of focus for Lincoln and that future strategy. So I know both Lori and Jenny want to also provide some opening comments before we get into the session today. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rokopoulos. I will now ask Lori to attend the podium with Jenny and Tom, and if they're going to join as well, to lead us through today's presentation or to speak to today's presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Russell and Mike. I'm going to provide the teams that we're going to work in later and some things for you to think about as you're going through the workshop today. Jenny's first going to take you through a presentation to go a little bit deeper into some of the results from your hard work over the weekend, as well as deeper into what we're going to do today. So Jenny, I'll let you go ahead.
Thanks, Laurie. All right. So last week we went wide and we looked at a whole bunch of trends that could impact the future of Lincoln. Today, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the top 8 trends that you chose through the Wiki survey and explore in more depth how we might respond to those trends and what the implications or consequences might be for choosing your priorities and for achieving your vision of One Lincoln, a place to grow, a place to prosper, and a place to belong. So foresight begins with facts. So we started with scanning the horizon and came up with 40 trends that were informed by conversations and research. This included 3 trends related to transportation, 3 involving public safety, 6 looking at the natural environment, 11 around culture and demographics, and 17 around economic trends. These were the trends that we worked with and placed on various horizons last week as the first step to prioritizing key trends that will help to inform the strategic priorities you will later choose. In last week's workshop, we added 5 to our list based on new contributions from this team to bring our total to 45 trends. We also, through this process, eliminated 2 trends. The 2 trends that were eliminated were beyond acceptable limits and no amount is good. Evidently, we don't seem to be too worried that any external factors are coming for our wine. We also added 3 more trends in the horizon scanning process that were added to the Wiki survey. These were Occupy Media, which has to do with the rise in social movements, Wellness as the New Luxury, which has to do with trends around healthy living, and finally, Beyond Meat, which has to do with new protein options. This brought our total to 46 trends. Now, of these 46 trends, there were 24 that we deemed important to Horizon 1, or the short term, 12 important to Horizon 2, or the medium term, and 5 that were important to the long term. Now, the trends themselves are not priorities, but rather they point to where our priorities might be and the choices you might need to make to achieve the vision that you want. So we're focusing today on Horizon 1 trends, looking at the next 3 to 4 years and how the decisions we could be making today will help us get there and achieve our long-term vision for the future of Lincoln. So over the weekend, you worked really hard and took those 24 trends and made decisions on what you believe are the most important factors facing the future of Lincoln. You did a Pairwise Wiki survey. And as you can see, it has a very complex mathematical model behind it. Now, this particular Wiki survey was developed at Princeton University with the help of Google Research and the National Institute of Health. The Pairwise Wiki survey you all filled out ranks and prioritizes a number of items based on forced either-or decisions. Although many of the trends are in fact interconnected, being forced to decide which one is more important is a great way to get at what you most value. This technique has also been used in the New York City Mayor's office to arrive at strategic priorities for a greener and greater New York City. So here are the results: bottom, middle, and top, where we'll be working today. Now, we're going to provide you with the data behind all of this, so not to worry. And we're going to go more in depth on these top 8 trends, exploring their possible responses and the consequences and implications that these responses might have. So here's a closer look. We have getting around, which has to do with multimodal or connected transportation. How much house can you afford, which is in reference to the housing affordability crisis. Blooming potential, agricultural infrastructure. Weathering the storm, unpredictable weather patterns. Startup, stay up, scale up, the foreseeable future of entrepreneurship. Canada Beyond 150, which planning for a sustainable future. High expectations, cannabis production. And finally, experience matters. The customer experience is the new brand. Now, some things to keep in mind that are connected to these trends. So as we explore the possible decisions that are available to us as leadership, I'm going to take you through some slides that have a little bit more information on each of the top trends you selected to prepare you for some deeper thinking that you'll do in our workshop today. So here they are again. We'll be moving forward with these key trends as the context for which you will be making your choices on strategic priorities. Here are the ones that didn't make the list. Now, although these trends did not reach the top of our list, you did all put them in Horizon 1 as important to the short-term and short-term priorities. So keep them in mind as we dive even deeper into the top 8 that were selected. So the next leg of our strategic foresight process is anticipate possibles. The future is plural. There's no data or information about it. And so we have to anticipate possibles and design strategies that are robust across a range of possible outcomes. So today, in 2 groups, we're going to be using a tool called Futures Wheel. Futures Wheel is a tool where you will explore or can explore different responses to some of these trends, the goal of which is to uncover and discuss possible decisions and the short-term and long-term implications of those decisions. How it looks in practice: you start by adding a trend to the center point of the wheel. You then discuss possible responses to that trend. From there, you look at what are the consequences of those responses. This is called first-order consequences. And you take it one step forward and ask yourselves, what could this mean for the longer term, or what are called second-order consequences? In the end, each trend will have its own futures wheel or map associated with it, which looks kind of like the example you see above. Awesome. And the mindset principle today that's going to be informing the process is openness to discover. We are here to guide you through a process and also to develop your future fit capabilities as leaders. An openness to discover is the ability to discover different points of view. One of the most important conditions to be successful in this next phase of our strategic foresight process is to consider all the perspectives and vantage points of the leadership team and council members when exploring these responses and their implications. Are there any questions before I call up Lori to divide the groups in 2? Excellent.
Oh, we have some questions.
Oh.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So back to the 8 that were selected. How close was 7? Or sorry, was 9 and 10 and 11?
So Experience Matters, which made the top 8, had a total of 58. Next in line, which was 2 ways are better than 1, online and offline citizen engagement, scored a 57. So they were very close, although the 2 are very similar. So Experience Matters and 2 ways to communicate are kind of interconnected. The next one below that is Age is Just a Number, which is the aging population, which scored a factor of 53. And the next 3 also scored a factor of 53, and those were Live, Love, Local, the rise of hyper-localization, and O Cannabis, which has to do with the socialization of cannabis.
And through you, Mr. Chair, so the what you showed us was in order of their popularity or the choices, right?
Correct.
Top left was number 1.
Correct.
And what was the number for the top one?
86,
86, okay.
which was the multimodal transportation.
Could you put those back on the, just to see them again,
Yep.
please? So how much a house you can afford was number 2.
Correct. They're in order.
Okay, thank you,
One
Mr.
of the
Chair.
interesting things with trends is that even though you end up having to select ones to dive deeper on, you will find that a number of these trends are going to keep surfacing in implications or things you need to consider, even though they're not a separate trend. Just as Jenny said, like the 2, such as Experience Matters and 2 ways are better than 1 to engage citizens, they're very close. And what you probably will find is as you go through and choose your priorities for where to put your resources and policies and things, that some of these trends will resurface as ways to actually accomplish that change, those are your priorities. So one of the important things when we went through this is actually to bring in new information that you know, trends or things that maybe weren't on your radar, and to introduce some of those new things to help broaden your thinking, your perspectives, and then narrow it down into making some choices, which everyone is anxious to get to, is how do you prioritize resources and policies and move forward with that. So that's where we'll go.
And just to add, you will receive the full report of all the data we collect at every stage, which will be made available to you at the end of our process when we have all the inputs.
Okay, another question, Madam Mayor?
Chairman, through you, first of all, I'd like you to know that I'm not interested in the priorities today, but I'm very, very interested in this comment that was in the notes that we got ahead of time that said that trends point to where the priorities might be. So, and I understand that it's all about openness, but it's also about allowing your mind to cast itself in different directions that you might not consider. So tell me about that process of choosing these 8 and identifying what's important to us around each of them, and how those comments get distilled down into moving us either in another direction or in a similar direction. Do I make any sense at all? I'm trying to think of this in a very, very abstract way. That's why I'm not interested in the priorities, because they're only going to give us a list, and right now, I'm not so keen on seeing another list.
So that is a terrific way of looking at why we go wide, because as you said, you don't yet want to get to priorities, but oftentimes people think, well, why does this matter? And part of this is to give you a broader perspective of things that you need to consider as you choose your priorities. Very tough work. So what we're trying to do, what the goal of introducing many trends and then making some choices, I think Mike mentioned in his comments that through your choices, your values, what you value, starts to emerge. And those are reflected in your choices as you go through it. And that's important to kind of narrow down what you're going to go deep on. Because in order to move forward with sort of understanding what are these trends, what do they matter to us, is saying, okay, if these trends, as we're looking at this trend, what policy decisions can we make? What are the implications? If this trend comes to our community or is in our community right now, what are both the positive and negative implications? What could happen? And one of the important things is that in your teams, we'll discuss the teams, your individual expertise or your strengths, if you bring it to bear in these discussions, you'll have a much broader debate and discussion around what might these trends mean for us as we start to shape and think about what our priorities should be as we achieve our vision. Is that an answer at all?
It tells me that the decision-making process, that the logic model, this is a logic model, it's the only thing I can equate it to. So the logic model tells us that there is an abstractness to the way we're going to make decisions, and it's not linear. And so because we are learning how to do this, we're going to learn that when we get confronted with 4 or 5 challenges in the same day, like today, hearing from the province, they're taking money here, they're putting money there, this kind of thing. We've already been through, we are teaching our decision-making powers to look at things more abstractly and I think more and being more nimble about how we go about making decisions in the future. We're not expecting to move along that same pathway that we would have otherwise. I don't know whether I'm describing it very well. I'm trying to get a grasp of this thing.
You're right on the money. That's why we always talk about building the capacity to be future fit as a leadership team. It's not just about narrowing it down and coming to priorities. It's actually about building your capacity as a team to have debates, to open your mind, to challenge your own way of thinking, so that in the end of the day, you end up at a better place. Because the future isn't known. It may be all around us, and if you look for the signs and the signals, you might be able to pick out different pieces. But the choices that you make on, policy, resources, where you put your focus will end up shaping what your community becomes. And so you're absolutely right. You don't know. This is about becoming more agile and adaptable.
So 5 years ago, I was all about the list. And now I don't care about the list, because the list will come regardless of what we do. That list will come, and it will be big and small, and it will take on whatever dimensions the community tells us. But it's how we make decisions about getting to the list or manipulating the list or whatever that's going to make the difference between great leadership and doing the same things the same way as we've always done them.
And now, some of my closing comments before we got into our groups was going to be that the best teams come together and debate and welcome different points of view. The best leaders are not necessarily well-rounded. The best teams are. And figuring out how to work together in that way is one of the things. So when you're in your groups, debate with each other, challenge each other, build on each other's ideas. But through that, you become more aware of your team's strengths, but you also become more aware of your own strengths by practicing or by thinking about them. And it includes your awareness to, Jenny talked about, we talked about awareness the last time, but your openness to consider different points of view. And as you debate, so talking about leadership, these kinds of exercises and the choices that you make help illuminate what you value. Most of us, our values are there and they drive our decisions and our behavior, but they go below the level of awareness. So as you're going through, my coaching to all of you, as you're going through this exercise today, listen for your underlying values and the choices that you're making and what you care about. It matters tremendously as leaders to tap into that, because that's the voice that you bring to your constituents and to the team around you. Most people don't hear their own voice on that front, so listen to it. We'll talk a little bit later about that as you go through it. But that's part of this exercise. If you listen, you'll hear more of that as you go through.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. One of the other things I took away from it, from our first workshop, and kind of spun things around in my head that evening, was a lot of the trends and our current strategies and tactics kind of hit multiple trends without us even really knowing it. And oftentimes, kind of like the butterfly effect, when you do something on one end, it has a negative effect on the opposite end that could be detrimental to another trend that we're trying to cope with. So thinking about going, not necessarily today, but down the road through this process, we can start evaluating what our current strategies and tactics are to see if they are actually hitting the mark with the key things that we're trying to accomplish in our current state and also down the road. So it's not just looking at what we're doing now, but how are those things impacting multiple trends across a broader scheme. And again, that butterfly effect of how things really touch on multiple modes. So it's one of the things I took away.
As a systems thinker, the way you're describing, the way you see that, what happened last time, you're a systems thinker, and that's a good kind of thinking to bring to this kind of an exercise, because you can't, turn one knob without something else happening. And that's why, even though, to Councillor McPherson's question about which trends made it and which ones didn't, we need to focus on, digging deeper on a few, but you'll find those other trends are embedded in there, either from a systems level, or as you dig deeper and say, well, what could our response to be? What might be the implication of that? If we do this, what might be that butterfly effect?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any other questions from council? No? Seeing none, we will now move into the workshop session. There will be a brief break in between the workshop session. We will come back with a summary of what has taken place and provide some final comments from the staff and council. So I will now ask staff and Mrs. Simpson to lead us into the workshop portion of the meeting. So if you will, divide us into groups as you may, and let us know where you would like us to do next.
So Jenny's going to facilitate one group. First group is the mayor, Councillor Timmers, Councillor Mikulik, Councillor Brunet, and Councillor Pashriva, with the town staff, Carrie, Greg, Terry, and Matt. And the trends that you are going to be digging deep on are weathering the storm, Canada Beyond 150, high expectations, experience matters.
Those four.
Those four. In the other group, Councillor McPherson, Councillor Reimer, Councillor Rashima, Councillor Russell, and then team members Shannon, Dave, Jacqueline, Paul, and Julie. And those trends are getting around multimodal, how much house can you afford, blooming potential, and startup, stay up, the foreseeable future of entrepreneurship. We'll be coming back together after you've dug deeper on all those trends, and then we'll share some of that thinking back so that you get the benefit of each other's thoughts. Now with those groups, I didn't actually envision this, but I should say, is there anybody that feels strongly that they want to work on a different trend? We'll have to trade beyond a certain point. We have to trade some people, but is there anybody who feels strongly they want to work on a different set of trends? Okay. Good.
Madam Clerk, point of clarity, where are we going to be meeting up? So we'll be meeting in the Camden room and in the Beamsville room? And reconvening back here afterwards. So group 1 is in the Camden room, group 2 is in the Beamsville room. All right. All right. Okay, council. Oh, I have to hit again? No, you're good. It's not on the script. Standing? Oh, that's okay. You get the pass. Okay, council, we are going to reconvene. Ms. Simpson and our CEO, Mr. Kakopoulos, will provide some comments regarding the workshop that has taken place. So if you please, Ms. Simpson first.
So we'll go into next steps in a minute, but in our talking about some of the talking about the exercise, we talked before we broke into groups. There were a couple things besides thinking through first and second order consequences and how challenging that can be when you think in a broad way and try and bring in as many perspectives. Did you, were there any things that came to mind as you were going through that about the values that underpinned choices that you were making or priorities that seemed to bubble up or the conversations you were having? Any insights about your values, your thoughts, the priorities, any of that?
Well, we talked about values.
Oh, 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 oh. Councilor Rajima.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Russell. I didn't find, I found that looking back, that we were all sort of along the same lines. I didn't find that there was a lot of friction among ideas. I found that we all seemed to go along, our ideas bounced off each other, but I didn't find that we were going any opposite directions on any thought processes. I thought it went pretty well. I didn't actually spend a lot of time thinking about my own values as I went through there. I kind of forgot that that was one of the directions that you gave us.
Is that possible that one of the values that you hold strongly is the perspective of others and listening to others, which is a value in and of itself?
Yes, that's definitely true. So I think we had a good balance in the room. So that's probably part of what's underpinning the good balance that we came out with. Yeah.
Observation. It's actually a really great observation for a team like this that's responsible for a community leadership.
Thank you, Councilor Rajima. Councilor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in our group, we struggled with the first one, which was the housing piece, and it was a big topic, and so we really were in quicksand in that one, pretty long. I think that the other three we're out in front of probably all three already, which I think made it a lot easier to get through those three. You know, example, the last one was about the more pedestrian friendly, you know, that type of, and with what we're doing with those things already, you know, it seemed like we already had, you know, initiatives to put in or that first level to put in fairly easily. But the bigger one, probably more questions than real solid answers or real solid comments going in.
During those discussions, did you, were any values for yourself or others illuminated through those discussions where you could say, I can see what that person values, or I can see my values coming through and how I'm landing on this perspective or this consequence of the thing that I'm bringing to light?
I think, you know, it comes back to maybe not values, but it came back to definition of affordable housing. That's what really, you know, I think we all kind of struggled with, was what is it in this town? What does that mean? You know, and so I think we all valued providing for, you know, affordable housing, but define it. You know, I don't think we've got that yet.
Thank you, Councilor McPherson. I think, just a further point on that, I think part of that discussion, the definition of what we need to kind of wrap our heads around with that group that we're trying to identify, is that the strategies we have now are good, but we might still be missing the mark to make sure that we are targeting and creating that entry-level residential area for those, again, the people who are trying to gain access to the market. I don't want to quantify it by saying low income or anything like that. It's just the people trying to gain access into it. And I think that spurs a much bigger conversation of how exactly do we do that, because it's an enormous multi-tentacled task for that to happen. So I think there was a lot of great discussion about it and a lot of great potential tactics that could come out of it, but it's much larger than we think about. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Russell. I think this is a great exercise, and I'm more of a listener. I like to observe and listen to everyone else. As far as my own values, I did hear them in the room, and that made me feel quite, I don't know what the word is. I was happy to hear that we really do seem to be aligned in a lot of the areas that we talked about. Not that we have to be aligned, but we just are naturally, I think, in some of the key areas that we talked about. I think it's a great exercise. We had a lot of discussion on all of our topics. I think it's great to focus on these trends and really be able to just throw everything on the table, the good, the bad, and whatever else, right? So that's kind of my perspective. As far as my own values coming out, I'm not so sure. I think I heard some of them, but it was great to hear everyone else's opinions as well and where they're coming from, and get a different lens, a different look, you know, from different opinions and perspectives. So, but I think
Coming out there and valuing other perspectives, because not all groups do, right? And listening, and when you were talking about being connected to the people in the room through the dialogue about stuff you care about.
I think collectively, we certainly are able to discuss these topics pretty thoroughly, and I think it was great. I think it was a really good exercise. So I'll definitely be pondering it more as we move along. And but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of the issues that we discussed, we debated, we have been working on, we've identified, and a lot of them overlap somewhat. The challenge for us as elected officials will be, because we are taking the time to dive into the subjects on an in-depth basis and getting to know what we need to do as elected officials, trying to gain the trust or trying to ensure that the ratepayer trusts us to make those decisions based on the time that we've taken to dive into the issues and hopefully make Lincoln a better place moving forward. So that's my take.
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I found this a very, very satisfying exercise for the following reasons. We weren't looking for solid solutions at any time, regardless of which point we were looking at. And so we chose cannabis first, and it was hard because there were so many elements of it that we don't have control over. But I think it was good that we landed on that in the first place, because we obviously learned something about going through that very abstract dimension. So when we moved on to the other subjects, I think it just happened more easily, and it was very open and very more flowing, which I think was really important. And I think that we identified a lot of first, second, and third order considerations, which I think was really important. I was very happy about that. Nobody talked about barriers. I don't think I heard anything about, well, we can't do that because of this. there was none of that, and there wasn't any grumbling in the room about negatives around things that we had done that didn't work. It was really quite excellent. I don't know how that happened. It was just an outstanding performance, I guess. And it was all about idea seeking as opposed to final solutions, which I think this is what this is all about. So I really appreciated the freedom that people expressed in seeking those solutions. I very much appreciated the fact that since, as I said before, I've been through this, no staff, intermittent staff, having the staff embedded was the best process because it brought a dimension that was in some ways realistic. It was also reminders of things that we had been doing and policy that we had made, which is kind of brings you back to the reality as well. And I'm not sure whether, I don't think this is a bad thing, but I never felt any negative tension in the room. In fact, it was really very, very positive, and I very much appreciate, and I hope everybody else had that experience in both groups because I like this process very much. And it is much more valuable than any other strategic planning process that I've ever been involved in. And I can tell you, I've been questioning all my mayor colleagues. Nobody is doing this. They're not doing anything like this. They're going back to the same old ways. And I don't feel that they're going to achieve what we're going to achieve here. So thank you very much.
I heard a value there about leadership in Lincoln, wanting to lead and taking the risk of a little bit of an uncomfortable. It's a little bit uncomfortable because you actually don't control it. You're opening it up to the views and the perspectives of all of your colleagues on the leadership team. And that can be a little bit uncomfortable. And the value that you expressed about One Lincoln and having gone through feeling that you were a little bit more comfortable even on the second go around, and you've tackled a hard one, cannabis at first, and Councillor McPherson talked about tackling, when you tackled housing, affordable housing. The fact that it got a little bit easier demonstrates that you're all becoming a little bit more future fit just in this short exercise so far. So hopefully you did find value in that too.
One thing I found was that, again, we were somewhat limited on time, and we were trying to compartmentalize our thoughts in 2 hours, which became an issue. I think on all four of our topics, we could have kept going and going and going. And I think as Mayor Easton made point of, that all the conversation was all positive. I think everybody was able to contribute. Everybody felt there was a lot of engagement. Again, yourselves as the rovers going in between the two groups, I'm sure you would probably say the same thing, that there was, on our group for sure, this overall positive engagement of, okay, so here's an issue, and getting different perspectives of expertise and just residential thought processes about how we can kind of think about and tackle some of these long-term solutions, or find long-term solutions for it. So
that mindset around the energy, when you have different perspectives, even if they're not all the same, that energy in bringing the value of being a builder. You built on one another's ideas, even if you took it in a different direction. But building is kind of like getting your hands dirty and doing the work. And that's what this is part of, getting your hands dirty, not just sitting back and talking about theory. You had to engage in debate around the ideas and building. And that just sets you up for the kind of the next step.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point something out, that in the past, there has been criticism of this council and other councils, that councils become their own kind of club, that it doesn't make any difference who you are or what your values are when you come in. Eventually, you will become part of the club. And this is a major concern, because I have always said, you know what, you can break your arm patting yourself on the back. But if you can go through a process like this, where you can, and you're not even challenging other people's ideas, you're just laying it out there, you're just putting it on the table. You're not saying it should be or it shouldn't be, it's just on there. And then what we do with it after is a different matter. I think that it provides you with a tool to remove clubbiness from the good feelings that we have about working as a team. And you want that, but at the same time, you don't want the public to think, oh, well, they all have the same ideas. That's not what it's about, and we know that. but it's also it's finding mechanisms to demonstrate to people that you are using independent thinking. I don't know whether that has any relevance to this at all, but I certainly know that that value in the community around the club is very big, and once it rears its head, it's not a good thing.
That in and of itself is a value, independent thinking, multiple perspectives. Yes, you have to come to a decision. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be choices. Not everything can be done. That's a tough job of leadership, but that is the job of leadership. And so the value around bringing different perspectives, putting them on the table, debating them with respect, knowing that you're going to have to find a path through to make some choices is actually a very strong value. So it's one of the only antidotes to groupthink. That's partly why we separate. I don't know if we have number of individual exercises, like even the surveys and that. It helps to bring your own perspective, then to engage in a group discussion that is somewhat a guard against groupthink. Not totally, but it's, there's the collective intelligence, so you want to bring your individual intelligence to create collective intelligence. So part of the process is around that.
Do we have any other comments from council? No? Okay. Ooh. Councillor Timbers.
Sorry, just one comment, and Mary Sin already commented on this already, but I just wanted to say as well, having the staff participating with us was fantastic, because they do have that, the knowledge that they can bring, well, we did this and we're working on that, and, reminders to us, because, we do a lot of work that we've maybe, we don't remember all the details. So it was really great to have their input, and it helped a lot in the discussion. And I found it very helpful, and it was it was really good, I think, to have them included with us, and just the whole team building, with the staff and us. So we're not, we're not separate. We are working together. So I think it was great. I thought that was a very good way to do it. So
Powerful. Not all leadership teams will work that way. As you know, not a lot of council and staff situations are not that way. So that again speaks to the values of this collective leadership team, to bridge that and say it's whatever struggles are, it's worth it, because we'll be better for it in leading one Lincoln.
absolutely. So we are a partnership, and we need to work together. So
It's great. Thank you.
Anyway.
That was a really good-
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Timbers. There being no further questions, anybody? I'd like to thank everybody for, oh, okay. Yes, we can do next steps right now, if you please, and then we will do a quick little wrap-up.
Sorry, just really quickly in terms of what to expect here forward. So there's going to be a bit longer of a delay before our next session together, and that is purposeful in its design. We have a big task ahead of us, thanks to all the deep work you did today, which is to synthesize all the insights, implications, consequences, and responses that we were able to generate today in 2 separate groups. So what we are going to do from there is transition those implications and responses that we generated into scenarios, which are basically representations of possible futures. This is to give you a tool to think and feel with before you decide which is the direction you want to be going. Now, the future is plural, so we won't be presenting you just one scenario. We'll be presenting you with multiple scenarios. And again, this is not to predict the future, but to provoke thought around what is possible. So that's sort of what's in store next. And so there is a lot of research that goes into the next phase, which is why we need a bit more of a delay. In between now and our next session, which will be happening around mid-June, there will be some digital surveys for clarification purposes on some of the work we did today, as well as to further us along in our analysis that'll help get us closer to that end objective. So stay tuned for some. You'll have more time this time to fill them out, we promise. Last time we got you to do it on your personal time over the weekend. This time you'll have a little bit more time to think through those digital surveys as well. So thank you again for your inputs and all the insights that you generated this far, all the deep work that's gone into this process, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.
I'm just going to add one piece on that. From the scenarios, we get to the process called backcasting. And this is one of Jenny's favorite things. I'm surprised she didn't want to tell you about
Final
it.
session.
Which is actually where you take from those preferred futures and backcast what actions need to happen in order to have the preferred future be the one basically you build together. So that's where you end up getting to your priorities in a meaningful way, so that you actually have actions and things you can do.
Okay. So there being no further comments, I thank you and your team for everything you've brought so far, and I know we all look forward to the next session. And I want to thank everybody for participating today and being fully engaged. I think from what I saw, it was a nice step forward and something positive to see from my early goings on council. So there be no further discussion. We have a motion, which is to receive and file the presentation from Lori Simpson from Leading Minds Lab regarding council priorities. We require a mover of the motion. Councillor Pachariva is the mover. All those in favor? Any opposed? None? Okay. Confidential items? None. Staff remarks? Do we have any staff remarks? There are none, just smiling faces. Do we have any committee remarks? Likewise. Oh, Councillor Pachariva. Come on.
Thank you, Chair Russell. I just want to thank you for standing in and doing yeoman's work and an admirable job. And you know what? It's always that, come from the school of swimming lessons where it's throw you into the deep end. You came up and swam. Good job. Proud of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I thank the clerk for having a wonderful script. So there being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned.